Hello, and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. Today, we've got Netflix's 119th film. It's the 2018 historical action drama, Outlaw King. It's directed by David Mackenzie. It stars Chris Pine, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Florence Pugh, Billy Holt, Sam Spruell, Tony Curran, Callan Mulvey, James Cosmo, and Stephen Dillane. I'm Jesse, and I'm here with MJ. How are you?
I'm very well. Well done on the cast. You're obviously giving lots of kudos to all the people that are in this film. Well done.
It's a big one. I think if you have a look at the extra list on this one, the budget on extras and people in the background of shots, it's quite extreme.
It would have to be, right? Like there's just the vastness, the magnitude of this film when you're trying to create some sort of historical accuracy on, towns and armies and stuff. I don't even want to begin how much work that would be.
Yeah, just the coordination of needing to put that together is crazy, and I guess that's what you get with a big epic film like this. So I think probably a good little segue into our Fast Flicks, where we give our quick little summary of it to start off with. So what have you got?
All right, for Outlaw King, it is a historical retelling from the 1300s of a Scottish man challenging for the crown and the independence of his country against the English incumbents.
Yes, similar. It's a follow-on from Braveheart. I haven't seen Braveheart in quite a long time. I had every intention of trying to give it a rewatch before this, but when I chucked it in, I was like, it's about 3.5 hours, over 3 hours, and I was like, don't have the time to do it. But similar characters, similar situations, and this one here is this is meant to be a Fast Flick, isn't it? Sorry. The rise of Robert Bruce as King of Scotland, a man who stood up to the British. That's my Fast Flick. Sorry.
There you go. Yeah, that is quite different to what you were talking about before. I got to ask, Jesse, because you obviously quite into your history. You obviously studied at university. You taught a little bit of history.
Yep.
How familiar are you with this story outside of the cinema world to it?
Yeah, very, very little outside of film. I don't have a massive interest in. I may have mentioned this at times before, but the monarchy is probably one of my least favorite topics to discuss, to cover, to look at. So my background in sort of European history is a bit of the revolutions in France and Russia, and a little bit of bits and pieces of the Tudors, but yeah, anything to do with the monarchy and the British in particular, I'm not a massive fan of. So I know very little apart from what we see on the screen. Yeah,
that's good to know, because I watch this kind of stuff and I'm like, because I don't know anything, and I'm like, is this just a big gap in my knowledge, or is it pretty common that we don't really know the details of old mate Robert the Bruce back in 1300 Scotland? So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know anything about it. It's all new to me when it happens.
And I think they tried to set that up at the start. Wasn't it like the true untold story or something? So maybe they were trying to pump it up that it is a little known story outside of possibly Scotland.
That's true. Yeah, and which is fine. Like, it's not like I didn't feel like I was missing anything, but I also wasn't sure if I was supposed to know everybody in it and be like, oh yeah, that old king so and so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Good. All right. Fill us in on some info that you're able to discover on this one and learn about how it's put together.
Yeah, well, this is obviously a big film for Netflix in terms of just the sheer size of it. So principal photography for this film started on the 28th of August in 2017 on location in both Scotland and England. And that concluded in November of that same year. So, it's a pretty decent stint of production, which is completely understandable when you watch the movie, and you can understand how much of an effort they would have had to go to shoot it all. But the first cut of this film was actually 4 hours long. It was eventually cut back to 137 minutes. And that's what they premiered it with at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 6 in 2018. So the overall runtime and the pacing in general was really heavily criticised in early reviews. So David Mackenzie subsequently cut nearly 20 minutes from the film. He basically admits that it wasn't ready, to debut at TIFF, but the lure to do it at such a big film festival was too strong to pass up. And fortunately, Netflix was fully supportive of the decision to edit it after that film festival. Probably a luxury that a lot of other movie studios might not have granted, but nonetheless. So he ended up cutting material that included battle scene, a major confrontation, which was backdrop by a waterfall, which I can imagine would have been hard to cut because that would have been expensive, big to film, and everything like that. There was an 8-minute chase sequence, and there was a scene where the title character actually meets William Wallace in the woods. So William Wallace is referenced quite a lot throughout the film, but we don't actually see him. So after all that cutting, it had its European premiere at the London Film Festival in October. And then it was commercially released on Netflix, as we know, on the 9th of November in 2018. So the other thing about this film, it does have a budget tied to it, an estimated budget of 120 million. What I find quite interesting, we're recording this in November of 2020. Even at the point right now, it's still the third most expensive Netflix production. So The Irishman is number one at 159 mil. Six Underground, the Michael Bay, Ryan Reynolds, Michael Bay, I guess you know what it is as soon as you say his name. But that was 150 mil. And then Outlaw King is next with its 120 mil, just above Triple Frontier at 115 mil. And then back down is Bright with 90, which we've covered on this podcast. So huge film for Netflix.
Yeah, I didn't even think to look at the Netflix comparisons. I just looked at like the big Hollywood blockbusters that sort of came in at 120 mil, and you had like The Life of Pi, Ghost Rider, Power Rangers, Oblivion, Rampage with The Rock, like these big sort of big blockbusters. So yeah, realistically, you could see this fitting in that cinematic style and gaining that sort of wide release, I guess, if Netflix didn't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you look at those films, 120 mil really does get you a lot. Like you would argue they're all kind of big budget films for a general movie going audience. I really enjoyed Rampage. It was a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine.
Yeah, I think we saw that together. I think.
I think we might have. Yeah,
it was a bit of fun. Yeah, I guess the few little things, just some nice little stories about this film and some symbolism, I guess, in this film with the plant that we see as a commonality, where Robert gives it to his wife Elizabeth, and at the start, which when they first are sort of together after a little bit of a building relationship, and then at the end as well, it's this the Scottish thistle, which is the official flower of Scotland, which is a nice little gesture, I guess, where it just shows that they put a little bit of detail. And there's this big close up of a spider web at some stage, and I looked a little bit into the reasoning behind that shot, and that was apparently this famous legend about Bruce's retreat to Ireland, where he saw this spider sort of down and out and trying to build a web, and he's like, the spider was successful, so I can be successful. Just these nice little analogies of why they've included these sort of things. So I thought that was quite a good attention to detail.
I love that that's one of the stories that gets passed through the 700, 800 years of Robert the Bruce, big fan of spiders. He had this epiphany moment with the spider web. Like that's the one that stuck.
Yeah. I guess that when you do look at this film too, you think about Braveheart, if you have seen Braveheart. And I think that one of the big things that the Prince of Wales it's alluded to that he's gay in Braveheart, whereas in this one, there's no real mention of that. So I guess that's such a long time ago too, that there's a little bit of interpretation there to play around with characters a bit and adapt them to how they fit into the actual narrative. Last little bit, I guess, is my translation part, where I had a look at what this was called in a few different places. So in Greece, it was called the Proclaimed King. In Hungary, it was the King of the Law. In Japan, it was Scottish Hero. In Serbia, it was the Lost King. And this one in Vietnamese is my favorite, because I'm not sure if this is a literal translation of the location, but it's called the King Left of France. So I got out the map. So I literally think that translation means that it's because Scotland is left of France. So that's all I could come up with.
That's actually amazing. In Japan, they actually don't refer to it as Scotland. They don't have great geographical knowledge, so they're well aware of France, and everything else kind of works around France. So I'm all right with that. It's
so
great.
We're south of France, so. Goodness gracious me! This was nominated for 2 awards too. One at the Scottish BAFTA Awards for Best Actress for Florence Pugh, and also for visual effects at the Visual Effects Society Award for Photo Real Feature. So neither one, but it did get a couple of noms. I guess we can.
I'm all right with that. The amount of effort they put in that, they can have some noms.
Yeah, it's nice. What about some consensus for this one?
Yeah, it's not too bad. IMDb is sitting at a 6.9 out of 10. That's off nearly 60,000 ratings. Now, I actually would very much remember when this movie was released. It did have a big kind of feel to it. Netflix really got behind it, as you would expect with that kind of production budget. So that 60,000 ratings is higher than what we normally would see on a lot of films, but probably relative to the fact that it had Chris Pine is a semi-big name for Netflix, but it also had quite a bit of backing behind it. But 6.9 out of 10, they definitely take that. And then it's 3.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd, so a little bit lower, and sitting at around 24,000 ratings. So still a decent amount of ratings. So it's not a bad little result for them, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess Rotten Tomatoes had it at 61%, and that's on 148 reviews. So it's fresh, but not certified. And I'm not sure why, because that's a lot of reviews. Maybe certified has to be higher up. I'm not 100% sure. Okay. The audience had it at 67, so a little bit higher on nearly 1,500. So that's quite a lot for Rotten Tomatoes, where often we see
pretty good for them
numbers. I think this is the last time I'm going to bring up the Google users too, because I think I've worked it out. So
okay.
92% of Google users like this, which I thought was extremely high. And I think I've worked it out. I think it's just the thumbs up or the thumbs down on that Google page under where it says the film. So if you give it a thumbs up, it goes towards the percentage or down. I don't think we need to look at that any further, because I scrolled down a little bit further on the main page for this one. And then there's another part there where it's like, there's 147 ratings and reviews on Google, but it had a 4.2 out of 5. And this is on people writing actual reviews. So it's obviously based on different on that's how I think I've worked out. The like and the thumbs down is different to actually posting a review and giving it a star rating on Google. So too confusing. I don't really care anymore. I'm over it. So I'm dropping it.
I'm all right with that as well. I must admit, I kind of thought that's what the Google users rating was, just if you click that thumbs up, because it's just too high. Like people who are Googling a movie, there's probably a reason they're doing it, because they really enjoyed it and they want to see more about it. So yeah, I'm all right with that. We'll omit it from our lineup.
Good. Okay. Goodbye time. But this is the time where we can give our early thoughts. So what are your early thoughts for this one?
Yeah, look, I thought it was all right. It's funny because when I finished watching it, it weirdly felt like it was rushed for what was, a 2-hour film. And it's interesting reading back saying they had to cut so much out of it. So I just reckon they fluffed around a bit too much early on. I enjoyed it when it got to the point where they were becoming these like stealth savages. But the first 75 minutes was basically leading up to that point, and most of that was pretty unmemorable. So, it was fine. It's actually one of the few times I've watched the credits and specifically looked out for the words "no animals were harmed" during filming, because I was getting pretty worried with some of those horses at certain times.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a good pickup. Oh, geez. Yeah, I've got that in our scenes later on, because that was some pretty graphic stuff in there.
Yeah, they did well if they didn't harm anyone, because that was rough.
I love a big historical drama. You sort of mentioned this earlier on. This one, you had to focus so heavily on who was who to start off. Like you mentioned at that start, it was like a scramble to just be like, okay, what's your connection to who, and who are you, and where do you fit in this whole situation? So, it was enjoyable, but it wasn't the best movie ever.
It definitely wasn't the best movie ever.
All right, what some characters that you've got?
All right, so Robert the Bruce, I kind of like the idea of having a "the" as your name. Like I wouldn't mind that. Played by Chris Pine. So, problem with him being the title character, he spends a whole lot of time at rock bottom, and it doesn't make it too compelling to watch. So the logical part of my brain continued to tell me that he was really, really up against it with what he was trying to do. And he didn't really seem particularly savvy or determined to fight through for much of this story. He obviously did, and I kind of knew that was going to happen anyway. But I'm watching this film going, yeah, but this guy's just kind of, he's at rock bottom. He's a bit flat. He's not really doing much. What's next? So he also wasn't an overly inspiring leader, which is fine. But it just doesn't jump off the screen when you're trying to sell me this 2-hour historical epic as well. So, there's nothing wrong with him as a character, but he wasn't William Wallace in Braveheart. It was never going to be a huge film with him at the reins. I feel.
And yeah, I reckon also too, like you mentioned, William Wallace is dead. So, and you have these memories of what he's like. So it's really hard to be like, oh, this is the person taking over almost. And you see it in this rugged, Chris Pine sort of character who often plays quite a clean character. I don't know if that makes sense, but he's often that tailored sort of nice looking, sort of character. So yeah, I think you're 100% on track there. That it's hard to. I think they mention it too throughout, where he's like, oh, I'm not going to come fight for anyone who's never actually proved themselves or won a battle. And as an audience, to hear that dialogue, you're like, yeah, it sort of feels that way. That it's hard to get behind someone who you don't know bits and pieces about, but you don't really see them having that ability to win. And sometimes I think you need that in a character. You need these small wins early on to prove that your faith in a character is going to be rewarded.
Good point.
He killed that was it the commune character, Comwin?
I think it was just Common, yeah.
Common, yeah. And because he was going to snitch, and this is different in real life, which I thought was interesting. He tried to kill him, and then he didn't actually kill him, so he sent some of his soldiers to go back and finish the job. Like just these little things that sort of challenges the idea of the character, and what they actually mean, I guess, and what their motives are. I think the one thing that sort of frustrated me the most, and I don't know if this is just because I missed it, maybe I did because I was too focused on trying to work out who was who, but this idea that he had some hurt and some sadness about Marjorie's mother not being there. But I would have liked some identification of what happened with her. Did
I think they said it. Yeah. No,
I must have missed it.
Well, I want to say that she died during childbirth, or they did reference it. Yeah.
All right, good. Yeah, I must have just missed it because to me, now that I know that's better, but I was a little bit worried about that. And I did like though that he identified that he wasn't necessarily a good man, but he was trying to be, and they literally say that. And I just thought that was a nice little way of looking at him. That he's probably not the that hero that you just want to get behind, but at the same time he has these issues, but not as a conflicted character as you can see either.
Yeah, I agree. He was fine. He was the kind of guy I'd be happy to hang out with. I'd probably be happy to serve under him. But watching a movie, I wasn't that moved by him. He didn't do much. That's the thing. He never jumped. And it makes you wonder if this is the untold story. And then you obviously shared the facts about him not actually properly killing John Common. Maybe his story just ain't that inspiring, and this bloke just isn't that inspiring. And so no one actually bothered digging it up until someone's like, "Oh, this is a bit of a gap in our knowledge. Let's tell the story." And then had to tweak little bits of it to make it somewhat interesting, and it still kind of missed the mark.
Yeah, true. All right, who have you got next?
I've got Prince Edward. Just felt pretty cliche, like the whole snotty son of the king who's constantly trying to prove himself, and he does so by being uncompromising and violent. He's ultimately brash and foolish and flawed, and you just know exactly that he's never going to win. That was kind of the thing. This guy is too much in that category for me to think that anything else is going to happen to him at the end.
Yeah, I think that those daddy issues were things that were just highlighted throughout that. Like you mentioned, this cliche story of someone who wants to be a leader that's brought down continually by the person in charge who's their father or who's in charge of them. And I don't know, was he a good, I think he was just a bad character. There was this argument that he was trying to prove that he was better than his father, but I think he was just as bad. And that death of his father scene where, he's has this final on his deathbed, this conversation with his dad, like, you were just scared of me, that I was stronger than you. I didn't believe that. I was just like, I don't think so. Like, I just think you're a bit of a scoundrel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He was, yeah. He was just, as I said, it was just too cliche. Everything he did was bad. It wasn't like they give you this redeeming feature that makes him a little bit complex and you're a little bit unsure about him. It was just like, oh, this guy's super evil. And because he's so spoiled and bratty, it's going to be his downfall that he's going to think he can do more than he can do. And, well, that's exactly what happened.
I've got Elizabeth down there next because, unfortunately, she does come across, and I'm not sure how much, if she had extra in this 4-hour cut, but she comes across almost as one of those side female characters that doesn't get enough time that you want. And although I did enjoy watching that relationship at the start with Robert slowly develop and grow. I liked that it wasn't just like she hated him the whole time, or it was like one little scene that led to her being like, oh, I love you now. Like, there were these nice little moments throughout at the start that sort of built towards that. I thought that was quite nice. And, she chooses she's like, I'm going into battle for you, and mentions, you're my husband. And I did enjoy that. And
to that point, though, I actually enjoyed that she didn't just choose that because he was her husband. It was because she agreed with him, and obviously, husband as well. I'm going to support my husband, but only because what you're saying is something that I actually truly believe in. I think that's one thing that does come out with her, is that she's a woman in this movie who does have a brain. She does think for herself, and she ends up standing up for herself, to the detriment of her own health and safety. So I was pretty in on that character, but you're right that I think she went missing a little bit. I think there was a lot more to play out with her that we didn't really get to see, and then it was kind of like, last thing we see, she's in a cage hanging over a castle. Next thing, she's running on the beach to see her husband again, and you kind of, you wish you kind of had known more about her story, because I think I found her a bit of I was pretty drawn to her, and I think she's a bit of fresh air.
Yeah, good. Anyone else that you wanted to discuss?
I've got King Edward, so the king until he died. Yeah. He kind of felt like a villain, but then they moved off him to make sure that you knew his son was the villain a little bit. So he was pretty evil, and he probably felt more in control, but there was this weakness to him that's what I kind of felt like, they're going to like give you a new villain. That's like, this guy's kind of a bit feeble and old, and that was kind of what they were doing. But they were basically just as evil as each other. The only reason that he was less evil was because they had to make sure that the young guy was the true villain of the film.
It's a bit of a quick rush death too. It was like, oh, quick, let's go out to battle. And then next second, oh, we're in a tent, we're dying.
Reckon we might talk about that one shortly.
Good. I had down Angus MacDonald and James Douglas just as like these two supportive sidekicks, I guess, that had some good moments throughout. That it was nice to see some loyal people, and he wasn't just this lone wolf throughout.
Yeah, super loyal too, with their counsel, but also with their support. So they, especially Angus, provided tons of counsel, and basically every time he said something, Robert was like, "Oh yeah, good idea, let's do that." I probably didn't get the credit he deserved. And Douglas was just super entertaining. I was a big Douglas man. I thought he was great.
So we've got the director of this one, David Mackenzie. Now the only thing I know, he's done Hell or High Water, which also stars Chris Pine. I purchased that when it came out on DVD. Still haven't watched it though, but I've got it sitting there. The other film he's known for is Startup from 2013. I've heard of this film and I'd seen the poster, but I've got no idea what it's about. So I'm quite interested to check that one out. Startup. Yeah. All right. Time to talk about some scenes. What scenes did you like in this one?
Well, the first one that I did like was when he killed John Common. It really raised the stakes nicely for what was actually going on. I think you said it was very heavy with characters and trying to figure out what was going on. And then when he just did a sneaky little stab, I was like, oh, okay, like something's actually happening. So that was good. I kind of liked it, and I've obviously pushed like an hour or so into the film after this. This is my next favorite scene, but I kind of like it when he found out about his brother and his wife and his daughter. So his brother getting killed, his wife and his daughter getting captured. They're on that sort of island, and there was this brief moment of calm and symphony, and it all just got torn away really quickly. And I thought his reaction was pretty good, and it really set up the back, probably the final act of the film, to be honest. And I thought it was just a nice moment in general.
Yeah, well,
and then from then,
he gets on that boat and they've got that close up on his face and he just looks like, I'm going to get revenge.
I think I was kind of done by that point. I think I preferred him on the beach. I think it went a bit too far there, but I really liked it when they took that first castle. I think I said that I loved it when they were actually taking those castles and being savages. That was cool stuff. So I wanted to see more of that. And I think it's fair to say I did enjoy the final battle scene. I enjoyed the tactics behind it, fighting in the mud. It would have been pretty crappy to shoot that, because just would have been a bog, and it wasn't glamorous in any sort of way. And all of that was basically highlighted by Douglas just going off his rocker every time. I was a huge fan of him just losing it every time. That was pretty interesting. So that's it for me. There's a real sentiment about when I actually got into this film.
Yeah. I was keeping track at the start, and I did see this on IMDb, but that first shot, I was sitting there watching it closely because I was watching it for a couple of minutes. I'm like, hang on, this has not cut. This is continually kept going. And I think was it about 9 minutes it went for altogether, that opening tracking shot. I was pretty impressed with that, to be honest. Like, to go one take, 9 minute tracking shot, it's just, and the amount of people that were in that shot, the amount of movement in and out of the tent, back in, like, I was pretty impressed. Like, that had me straight up. I'm like, okay, this has got some good techniques in it, even if it was hard to work out what the hell was going on.
Well, that's the thing, because it was really obvious to me what they were doing. In that sense, it felt gimmicky. Like, it was cool and it was a good effort. And you're right, there was a lot of cast there, and they had to go in and out of the tent and then back out of the tent. But it probably took away from the actual viewing experience because they were trying to sell you on this. And I'm like, okay, they haven't cut this shot yet, so I'm just going to keep watching it until they cut it, because I was aware of it. And maybe you probably don't have to be aware of it. So yeah, credit to them for doing it, but they probably took away from the opening of the film, I reckon, by doing it.
Maybe I agree with you. I reckon maybe for us, because we're maybe specifically looking at that, whereas some people wouldn't even care. They'd just be like, oh, cool, I'm just watching these characters move around. So yeah, maybe we just look at it from a different perspective. But yeah, I agree. It's a little bit distracting from what's actually happening, because I was too focused on, this is cool. But I
it's impressive.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, I think the next few of my things are just from those takeovers that they did. Like the idea of, they do this truce, it's a Sunday, no fighting, and then this surprise attack at night. Some of those arrows coming through the roof, and it was cool. Some of the fights and stuff in that scene were nice. When the Prince of Wales kills Robert's brother. Oh, that gutting.
That was brutal. Yeah,
I was just shocked and surprised to see it on screen, and like that got me like back in. I might have been dozing a little bit. I was like, oh, well, geez, this is impressive.
It was like they wanted to set you up with something really gory. So when you saw Chris Pine's wang later on, you're already expecting a level of mouth open kind of stuff.
The last one's it's that Palm Sunday one where they have that church service and just that massacre in the church. And like I have like no doubt that this is influenced heavily by the Red Wedding of Game of Thrones. Like, to me, that was literally a rip off of that 100%, but it was still cool. It was cool.
Well, maybe Game of Thrones were reading through the archives and actually, if it was exactly how it happened, maybe they picked it up. Well done, George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, good. All right, what are some things you want to forget from this one?
Yeah, I thought Robert's father, his death scene felt pretty odd to me. They were kind of talking quite normally, quite naturally, quite eloquently, you could argue. And then he was kind of dead within 20 seconds, really peacefully. Like, it wasn't, obviously he had to die, but I think they could have made him a little bit more closer to death before he died. So.
I thought both the father's deaths were really quick and just to.
Well, I'll get to that now, because the king's death was really weird and sudden. Like, it was terrible, to be perfectly honest. The guy was fine. The only reference was he did mention at one point that he stumbled when he was walking because he was trying to prove another point. And then obviously he's on his horse and he slows down. And then, like, next scene, he is looking deathly in a bed. Like, No, that was pretty ordinary too. You probably had to just lead up to it, and maybe that's why that was a 4-hour cut when they first made the film, because it felt really weird. There were, so you mentioned this as well. Just you like the fight scene, which was, I agree. But the scene where they wanted to fight 1-on-1 and they had to reschedule it because it was a Sunday, like that has aged so badly. Because how can you just turn those emotions on and off? Like I want to kill you. Let's fight, you and me. Let's fight. I'm going to kill you right now. It's Sunday, mate. So we'll do it tomorrow. It's, oh yeah, no worries. Like that was bizarre to me, and I get it. I completely get it, but it was just so weird. And then it obviously made sense because they had to have the ambush.
But you even go back to the World War One and these sorts of truces where they made. So it's not even that distant from our memories. It's just it's very, very interesting that it does feel very distant to us, doesn't it? That just because you can't put aside a day, even if you dislike someone that much, that we're just like, nah, let's just get over and done with now, because we're in this society that's just click, click, click. We got to go as fast as we can.
Yeah, I get that, but I just also think on screen it was a weird look, because I was like, oh, here we go. This is a nice confrontation. This guy's a bit of a psycho. He's going to just go nuts, and I want to see Robert fight. And then it was like, it's Sunday, mate. I'm not going to fight you. It's like, oh, okay. Well, I'm not going to see that. There was also a couple of attempts of humor that didn't work. One after the wedding night when the people sitting outside were like, oh, that was quick. It just didn't really, I was like, oh, we're doing jokes now, are we? Like I was not in that mood. And two, when Douglas kissed Angus on the mouth after he warned him about going near his daughter, I was like, where'd this come from? Both of them just seemed really out of place. So it didn't work for me. And then the final thing that I didn't really like, I would have, as much as I liked, what was her name? Elizabeth, and I thought Florence Pugh did a nice job. I kind of was more invested in the father-daughter relationship, and I think I would have preferred to see him reunite with his daughter at the end than his wife, who he's known for 3 weeks. Because when they're running on the beach together, I was like, that's all well and good. Where's his daughter? And she's like, oh no, yeah, she's just up the hill or whatever. I was like, I wanted to see that. That was more important to me. So, but I guess you've got your 2 big name actors. You got to get them together. So fair enough. But
as soon as she came running out, my notes, I started writing, "Where's Marjorie?" And then thank God I was like, of course they're going to say, "Oh, she's okay." They needed to. They had to.
It's like she'd clocked off for the day because kids can only do X amount of hours in the day, and they couldn't get her in.
She was doing her biology homework over the side. 33 minutes to go was when we got to see Chris Pine's penis. I'm putting that in my forgettable scenes because I mentioned last week that I knew this was coming. I was disappointed that the camera didn't stay long enough. That's what annoyed me. So I'm calling that a forgettable scene.
I just don't know why it happened.
Well, I put in my notes here, I said not long enough. And now I look back at it, I'm like, that's got a double meaning.
In fairness to Chris, I think it was long enough.
That scene was not long enough. That's what I meant by not long enough. That annoyed me. I was like, if you're gonna have it, like make it worthwhile, not just I'm having a bath. Ooh.
Even have a reason for it. Whether he's getting tortured and he has to be naked. Like I think nudity in a film, obviously, there's a certain film that has nudity for the sake of nudity, and that's fine as well. But if you're making a historical epic with nudity, you probably want to give your actor a real reason to be able to do it.
There's almost a better opportunity in the sex scene earlier on. That's
where I thought it was going to come.
Yeah.
It was really strange, but it happened, and here we are talking about it for a minute. So got our attention.
We'll move on. I thought towards the end, there's Robert does this big rev up speech right before that big final battle, and I was like, this was a really poor speech. And all of a sudden, it was the first time I noticed that he had a Scottish accent. I was like, I don't think he'd had a Scottish accent the whole movie, and all of a sudden he's got this big, thick. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? That really annoyed me.
It was a terrible speech.
It was a bad speech. And the last thing I heard was all those horses that fell. That was horrible. That was really bad to watch. I just couldn't believe it. That no animals were actually hurt in doing any of those things. Doesn't make sense.
I'm really hoping they were all CGI animals.
That would be the perfect response, because I felt horrible.
Yeah.
All right, what's this one trying to say? What's some ideas?
Look, yeah, it's. I mean, there's a whole lot about honor and loyalty. Obviously, the whole reason this battle started was because they felt that they had their right to the throne of Scotland specifically, and they didn't want to be pushed around by, I guess, a government that they didn't think had their interests at heart. So ties into the idea of fighting for what you believe in and basically risking everything to make sure that you get that, which is a very common theme in a lot of movies, particularly ones that involve any kind of battle of sorts. There's always, we don't like the way that we're getting treated, so we're going to fight our way out of it, and our intentions are pure. So it does, talk about a lot of things that we've seen before, but it doesn't mean it's not, well done and prevalent.
Yeah. This idea of war as well, where they keep mentioning, what you have to give up to be a leader in this type of situation, your family, your relationships, and this idea too of the British being this invading force across multiple times that we see. And they mention this idea of chivalry as well, like these rules or these unwritten ground rules of war, and this idea too that it's time for a change, and it was okay for them to mix these rules up a bit and they use the land to their advantage to build those sort of little trenches, and they didn't follow those. They obviously the other side, the English, broke that handshake on that weekend that they had, but then they started going into these guerrilla tactics, and this idea of revenge too was quite obvious through a few of these characters and getting back their land and their property they've lost, as well as David versus Goliath, big versus small. Yeah. Like so many scenes where how many men have you got left? Oh no, 40. Oh, how many have you got left?
40.
Five. Let's say the big. Lots of people like to see that story of the small person getting up over the bigger one.
Oh, for sure.
And yeah, good. All right, what do we take away from this one?
Look, whilst I'm sure it would have really popped on the big screen in a nice dark cinema, to me, this movie felt more like the kind of film that you watch in high school in your history class, where you love the fact that you're actually watching this Hollywood movie rather than getting stuck in your textbook. And then the teacher's got to fast forward every single time there's boobs or penises on screen, and everyone kind of has a bit of a giggle and all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of movie this felt like.
Yeah, okay, fair. I know what you meant, like you're saying, because as soon as you said that, I brought up memories of watching Spartacus and Vikings and these Kirk Douglas films from the 50s and 60s that you used as you'd get booked into the room with a little trolley on the TV and you get to watch it.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the same time, like it brings back memories too of I think we watched Wall Street at school for business or legal studies or something, and there's a scene where there's a sex scene in the back of a car, and our AV department had just put this blank screen on saying, edited by the school. And we had to watch 2
That's amazing.
We watched 2 minutes of this, our school name with edited by the school until it got to the next scene.
I still remember watching Romeo and Juliet in like year 9 or 10, and it was the old school Romeo and Juliet, and there was like the glimpse of a Juliet boob at one point, and I think the teacher like missed it the first time. She's like, "Oh no!" and she's trying to like fast forward it, and then the next time that we had to watch, she's like, "All right, what part are we up to?" And the whole class is like, "Oh no, we're up to this part," which was like a minute before it happened again. So we watched it again. So yeah, there's just some fun experiences like that. We actually also watched American Werewolf in London in media in like year 10, and there was like full boobs all through that. And the media teacher was just like, "Doesn't matter, you guys are old enough, you can see this." And everyone's just like, "Whoa, look at this!"
Goodness gracious me! I think I looked at Anyway, well, I'll keep moving. We'll keep telling stories like all day about this. For me, the costume design in this was pretty incredible. The amount of people in lots of shots, the time specific costumes that they had, and a lot of the drone shots showed off some lovely scenery.
That's true.
Shots above too. So some nice visuals to take out of this one. Did you go on IMDb at all to check anything out?
I did, and get what this is a guy that I IMDb'd back when we watched the movie Caliber. So Tony Curran plays Angus, who was the guy in Caliber, and I IMDb'd him during Caliber because he was also the Invisible Man from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen back in 2004. So sorry, Tony. Once I IMDb you once, I shouldn't have to IMDb you again, but I'll stick with you now. So that was my IMDb for this one.
Cool. Good. Yeah, I didn't jump on. So, yeah, all good. Time for some questions. Anything you want to ask?
Well, you kind of touched on this because I wanted to know your thoughts on Chris Pine's accent, because I actually thought it got progressively worse the more dialogue that he had. But if you didn't even pick up on it at the start, then maybe you didn't.
I don't know. That just really annoyed me at the end. I thought it was really bad.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Good. Anything else?
No, that's it.
I guess his character, Robert, he was complicated. Reminded me a bit of Ned Kelly. Do you think he's a hero? Or is he?
I do.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
I do, because of the way he led.
That was yeah.
Oh, yeah, true. But his intentions were great. Like, he basically freed his country. And I just don't think he was he was heroic in the sense of what he achieved. He just didn't seem that heroic whilst he was doing it.
Yep. Good. Just these aren't questions. These are just things I jotted down as I was doing a bit of research. So 6 years ago, Scotland had a referendum on becoming an independent country, which was defeated. So they're still fighting to become independent, which is crazy. Just 6 years ago. This film's 700 based on events 700 years ago. Last one you mentioned before, you checked out the credits to see the animals weren't harmed. I got down to and there's this little sections like Mr. Pine. So we'd like to thank Mr. Pine had an assistant. He had a personal chef. He had a personal assistant chef and a personal trainer. So I guess that's what comes with a big Hollywood star. They bring their own little crew with them. The weirdest, and sometimes I was like looking at some weird roles on films, but there was a location Wi-Fi provider. So there's one person on set whose job was to make sure that the cast would have Wi-Fi wherever they were filming. That's funny.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I guess it takes a whole host of people to make a film, and you could very easily not put those people in the credits, but they still played a role. Like, yeah. But I mean, it's not uncommon for big stars to have. They always have assistants, but I don't know if their chefs have assistants. That's probably a good one.
Yeah, it's a good one. All right, time to wrap it up. We give it a rating out of 5 and give it an average. What are you thinking for this one?
It really didn't do too much for me. I thought it was fine. It got more engaging once they actually started to show some tactic and some strategy within their game plan. But the majority of it before that was pretty forgettable. But there was still enough in there for 2.5 stars for me.
Good, yeah. To me, the highlights are the visuals. I thought the acting was fairly okay. There weren't anything too bad apart from some accents, I guess. The budget was obviously a nice one to get some nice effects and locations and things like that. So I'm giving it a 3, which gives us a 2.75 out of 5. We are on social media. So we've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Pop a question up for the week. Is revenge a dish best served cold? just in there for the Prince of Wales. He needed something to rev him up to continue to get that revenge. Oh,
yeah, good question, mate. It's an oldie but a goodie.
Good, yeah. I had to Google search what it was because I was like, don't want to stuff it up.
Best served warm.
Warm, yeah. We're back next week. We have another 2018 film. It's the Western anthology film, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, directed by the Coen brothers, Joel and Ethan. Stars James Franco, Brendan Gleeson, Zoe Kazan, Liam Neeson, Tim Blake Nelson, Tom Waits, etc., etc. I'll leave the rest off, but we're back again for that one next week, which is a good one to look forward to.
I have been hanging out for this one, and I've specifically not watched it because I know that we were going to cover it. So the day is finally here, and I'm looking forward to watching it.
Me too. Very similar thoughts. It's been sitting there on that watch list, so bring it on. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.
You will. Looking forward to it, mate. See ya.